Jiho Kim walked through the massive hallways of Nexus Prime Academy, his footsteps echoing against the crystal walls. The academy was huge, bigger than any building he had ever seen on Earth. Students from dozens of different worlds moved around him, their strange forms and colors making him feel very small and very human. A group of tall, blue-skinned aliens with 4 arms stopped talking when he passed. They stared at him with their large black eyes, whispering in their musical language. Jiho had learned enough alien languages to catch a few words. Deathworlder, dangerous, primitive. He kept walking, pretending he didn't hear them. This was his first week at the academy, and already he knew his reputation. Humans were famous across the galaxy, but not in a good way. They called Earth a death world, because almost everything on the planet could kill you. The weather, the animals, the plants, even the bacteria were more dangerous than anything most aliens had ever seen. And the humans who survived on such a world? Many aliens thought they must be monsters themselves. Jiho entered his xenobiology classroom and found his usual seat in the back corner. The room was designed to fit many different types of beings. Some seats were filled with water for the fish-like Aquari students. Others were heated for the cold-blooded Reptani. The ceiling was high enough for the flying Avari to perch on special poles. "You're early again," said a familiar voice. Mirai Park, another human exchange student, sat down next to him. She was studying to become a xenobiologist and was much smarter than Jiho when it came to alien life forms. Her black hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and she carried a thick notebook filled with detailed drawings of alien creatures. "I like the quiet before everyone gets here," Jiho replied. He pulled out his own notebook, which was much thinner than Mirai's. While she drew perfect diagrams, he mostly wrote down simple observations about alien behavior. "Any trouble today?" Mirai asked, looking concerned. She had seen how some of the alien students treated humans. "Nothing new," Jiho said. "Just the usual staring and whispering." The classroom began to fill up. Taemin Lee, the 3rd human in their class, walked in with his usual big smile. Unlike Jiho and Mirai, Taemin tried hard to make friends with everyone. He waved at a group of small furry aliens called Fuzari, but they quickly looked away. "Hey friends," Taemin called out as he sat down. "Beautiful day to learn about alien monsters, right?" "Don't call them monsters," Mirai said quickly. "They're just different life forms." "Right, sorry," Taemin said, but he was still smiling. "Different life forms that could eat us in one bite." A loud screech filled the room as Kixara, an Avari student, landed on her perch. She looked like a giant bird with bright red and gold feathers, sharp talons, and intelligent amber eyes. She was proud and aggressive, and she made no secret of her dislike for humans. "The Deathworlders are here again," she screeched in perfect galactic standard. "How wonderful. I hope we don't have to smell their fear today." "We don't smell like fear," Taemin called back cheerfully. "We smell like soap and determination." Kixara's feathers ruffled in annoyance, but before she could respond, a huge form filled the doorway. Bolin was a Gorvani, standing over 8 feet tall with thick gray skin, small black eyes, and 2 large tusks jutting from his lower jaw. He was known for picking on smaller students, and he especially enjoyed making humans uncomfortable. "Little humans hiding in the back again," Bolin rumbled as he squeezed into his reinforced chair. "On my world, creatures like you would be eaten before sunrise." "Good thing we're not on your world then," Jiho said calmly. It was the first time he had spoken directly to Bolin, and the big alien's eyes narrowed with interest. "Brave words for such a small creature," Bolin said. "Maybe you are not as weak as you look." The room suddenly went quiet as Professor Veltar entered. The helix species looked like a walking crystal, with a body made of clear, colorful minerals that shifted and changed based on his emotions. Right now, his body showed calm blue and green colors as he prepared for class. "Welcome, students," Professor Veltar said, his voice ringing like wind chimes. "Today we begin our study of apex predators from high-gravity worlds. These are creatures that sit at the top of their food chains, the ultimate hunters of their environments." Jiho leaned forward with interest. This was why he had come to the academy. Earth had plenty of apex predators, and he wanted to understand how they compared to creatures from other worlds. Apex predators, the professor continued, are shaped by their environments. A creature from a peaceful world will be very different from one that must fight to survive every day. The more dangerous the world, the more dangerous its top predator becomes. Kixara preened her feathers, like the great sky hunters of my world. Beautiful, intelligent, and deadly. Indeed, Professor Veltar said. But today we will study something even more remarkable. A creature from a world so hostile that even experienced hunters fear to face it. The Shadowstalker of Kethmore. The classroom fell silent. Even Bolin looked impressed. Everyone had heard stories about Kethmore, a high-gravity world where the smallest mistake meant death. Tomorrow, the professor announced, we will have a live specimen brought to class for observation. It will be safely contained, of course, but you will see firsthand what evolution creates when survival becomes an art form. Several students shifted nervously in their seats. The Fusari began chattering anxiously among themselves. Even Kixara's feathers lay flat against her body. Are you sure it's safe, Professor? Asked one of the Aquari students, bubbles rising from her water-filled helmet. Completely safe, Professor Veltar assured them. The containment field is designed to hold creatures 10 times stronger than a Shadowstalker. There is no danger. As class ended and students began to leave, Jiho noticed how they talked in worried whispers. The idea of being in the same room as a Shadowstalker, even a contained one, clearly frightened them. You nervous? Mirai asked as they packed their things. Jiho thought about it. He had grown up camping in forests filled with bears, wolves, and mountain lions. His father had taught him to respect dangerous animals, not fear them. A little, he said honestly, but mostly curious. Curious? Taman laughed nervously. This thing has killed professional hunters. I'm definitely nervous. As they walked out together, Jiho could feel eyes watching him. Tomorrow would be interesting. He had a feeling that the other students expected the humans to be the most frightened of all. After all, what could Deathworlders possibly know about real monsters? He smiled slightly. They were about to find out. The next day, Jiho arrived at class to find the room completely changed. A large, glowing energy cage sat in the center, humming with power. Thick cables ran from the cage to several control panels around the room. The normal desks had been moved back to create a wide circle around the containment area. Students entered more quietly than usual, their eyes fixed on the empty cage. Even Taman wasn't making jokes today. Mirai had her notebook ready, but her hands were shaking slightly as she prepared to take notes. Remember, Professor Veltar announced as the last students found their seats. This is a scientific observation. The Shadowstalker is contained and cannot harm anyone. Please remain calm and observe quietly. Kixara shifted nervously on her perch. How big did you say this creature was, Professor? About the size of your Earth Panther, Professor Veltar replied, looking at the humans. But much more intelligent and far more dangerous. Shadowstalkers are ambush predators with optical camouflage abilities. They can become nearly invisible to most forms of vision. 2 Academy security guards wheeled in a small, dark transport container. The container was making soft scraping sounds from inside, like claws on metal. Several students moved their chairs further back. The Shadowstalker has been sedated for transport, the professor explained. But the sedation will wear off quickly once we transfer it to the observation cage. The energy field will keep it contained while allowing us to study its behavior patterns. Bolin leaned forward in his massive chair. On my world, we hunt creatures like this for sport. It takes 20 warriors to bring one down safely. This specimen has already killed 3 trained hunters, Professor Veltar said seriously. Even with our containment systems, we must treat it with extreme caution. The security guards began the transfer process. They used long mechanical arms to lift something dark and sleek from the transport container into the energy cage. At first, the creature was completely still, lying on its side like a large cat. But as the sedation wore off, it began to move. The Shadowstalker stood up slowly and Jiho got his first good look at it. The creature was indeed about the size of a panther, but its body was longer and more flexible. Its legs ended in hands with long, sharp claws that could probably tear through metal. Its head was narrow with large, intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything at once. But the most impressive thing was its skin. As the creature became more awake, its black surface began to shimmer and change. Within seconds, it had completely disappeared from view, using perfect optical camouflage. Fascinating, Professor Veltar said, his crystal body showing excited yellow patterns. Notice how the camouflage isn't just visual. It's also masking heat signatures and even sound to some degree. Several students gasped as the invisible creature moved around the cage. They could only tell where it was by watching for the slight distortion in the air, like heat waves on a hot day. Can it break out? Asked one of the Fusari students in a tiny, worried voice. Impossible, Professor Veltar said confidently. The energy field can contain creatures with 50 times the strength of a shadow stalker. We are completely safe. The creature's camouflage flickered off, revealing it pressed against one side of the cage. Its large eyes were scanning the room, studying each student in turn. When its gaze fell on the humans, it paused and tilted its head slightly. Interesting, Mirai whispered, making notes. It seems more curious about us than the other students. Maybe it recognizes fellow predators, Taman joked, but his voice was tight with nervousness. Jiho watched the creature carefully. It was beautiful in a deadly way, perfectly designed for hunting. Its movements were smooth and controlled, showing no wasted energy. This was an animal that had evolved to kill efficiently and survive in a harsh world. Suddenly, Bolin stood up from his chair. "Let me get a closer look at this famous killer," he said loudly, walking toward one of the control panels near the cage. "Please remain in your seat," Professor Veltar said sharply. The observation area is off limits to students, but Bolin wasn't listening. The big alien was showing off, trying to prove he wasn't afraid of the shadow stalker. He leaned against the control panel, his massive weight causing several warning lights to flash. "Bolin, step away from the controls immediately," the professor ordered, his crystal body now showing alarmed red colors. The shadow stalker had gone completely still, watching Bolin with intense focus. Its camouflage flickered on and off as it tracked the large alien's movements. "What's the matter, Professor?" Bolin laughed. "Afraid your pet might break free? On my world, we wouldn't need all this fancy technology to handle one small predator." As he spoke, Bolin leaned even harder against the control panel. There was a loud crack as something inside the panel broke under his weight. Sparks flew from the damaged circuits and several alarms began to sound. "Emergency protocols activated," an automated voice announced. "Power fluctuation detected in containment system." The energy cage began to flicker like a broken light. The shadow stalker immediately noticed the change, its head snapping toward the weakening energy field. "Everyone remain calm," Professor Veltar called out, but his voice was shaking. His crystal body was now flashing rapid red and orange patterns of extreme alarm. "Security is on the way," but it was too late. With a sound like breaking glass, the energy field collapsed completely. The shadow stalker was free. For a moment, nobody moved. The creature stood perfectly still in what had been its cage, as if it couldn't believe what had happened. Then its camouflage activated, and it vanished completely from sight. The classroom erupted in panic. Students screamed in dozens of different languages as they scrambled away from the center of the room. Chairs fell over as everyone tried to reach the exits at once. The Fuzari students made high-pitched squeaking sounds as they ran. The Aquari student's helmet cracked from stress, spraying water everywhere. Kixara launched herself into the air, her wings beating frantically as she screeched warnings in her native tongue. "Death, death comes for us all!" Bolin, who had been so confident moments before, backed against the wall with his eyes wide with terror. His tusks were chattering as he realized what his carelessness had done. "Where is it?" someone screamed. "Where did it go?" The room was chaos, but in the middle of it all, Jiho remained perfectly still in his seat. While everyone else panicked and ran, he sat calmly, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of the invisible predator. Mirai noticed his stillness and felt a chill run down her spine. She had read about this in her xenobiology textbooks. When humans faced extreme danger, some of them didn't panic like normal creatures. Instead, they became very calm and very focused. The textbooks called it Deathworlder instincts, and they warned that it was one of the most dangerous states a human could enter. "Jiho," she whispered urgently, "we need to run. We need to get out of here right now." But Jiho didn't move. He continued scanning the room with the patience of a hunter, waiting to see what the shadow stalker would do next. And somewhere in the room, invisible and deadly, the perfect predator was deciding which of the panicking creatures would make the easiest prey. The shadow stalker materialized for just a moment near the back of the room, its large eyes scanning the chaos. Students were still screaming and pushing toward the exits, their fear filling the air like a thick fog. The creature's head moved back and forth, tracking the movement and panic around it. Then it vanished again, becoming completely invisible. Jiho watched the spot where the creature had appeared, noting how it moved. The shadow stalker wasn't attacking randomly. It was hunting, which meant it was thinking and planning. Predators like this didn't waste energy on unnecessary kills. They picked their target carefully. "The exits are blocked," Taman called out from across the room, his voice tight with fear. Students were crowding around the doors, but they opened inward, and the panic had created a dangerous crush of bodies. Professor Veltar was frantically pressing buttons on an emergency control panel, his crystal body flashing red and orange. "Security lockdown activated," he announced. "Nobody leaves until the creature is contained. Opening the doors now would release it into the academy." This news made the panic worse. Several students began crying. The Fusari were huddled together in a small group, their fur standing on end. Even Kixara had stopped flying and was now pressed against the ceiling, her feathers flat against her body. A soft scraping sound came from somewhere near the front of the room. Everyone froze, trying to figure out where the invisible predator was. "There," whispered one of the Aquari students, pointing at a spot where dust motes seemed to be moving in an impossible pattern. "I think it's there." The shadow stalker's camouflage flickered slightly, revealing its outline for just a second before it disappeared again. It was moving toward Kixara, who was trapped on the ceiling with nowhere to run. The creature had chosen its prey. Birds were natural targets for a predator like this, and Kixara's panic flight response had marked her as the weakest link in the room. "It's going for the Avari," Mirai whispered, her xenobiology training helping her understand what was happening. Flying creatures trigger chase instincts in most predators. Kixara seemed to realize the same thing. Her amber eyes went wide with terror as she looked around desperately for an escape route, but the creature was already positioning itself directly below her, invisible and patient. "Help me!" Kixara screeched, her proud voice now broken with fear. "Someone please help me." But what could anyone do? The shadow stalker was invisible, deadly, and focused on its chosen target. Even if someone wanted to help, getting close to the creature would only create another victim. That's when Jiho stood up. While everyone else pressed themselves against the walls or huddled in corners, the human student walked calmly toward the center of the room. His movements were slow and deliberate, nothing like the panicked scrambling of the other students. "Jiho, no," Mirai called out. "Don't go near it!" But Jiho kept walking until he was standing directly between the invisible predator and Kixara. He stopped there and waited, his hands relaxed at his sides, his breathing slow and steady. The scraping sound stopped. The shadow stalker had noticed him. For a long moment, nothing happened. The room was completely silent except for the soft whimpering of frightened students. Even Professor Veltar had stopped working on his control panel to watch what was happening. Then the air in front of Jiho began to shimmer, and the shadow stalker became visible again. The creature was magnificent and terrifying at the same time. Its black skin rippled with muscle, and its claws were longer and sharper than they had looked from a distance. Its large eyes were fixed on Jiho's face, studying this strange being who showed no fear. The shadow stalker tilted its head, clearly confused. Every other creature in the room was radiating fear, sending out the chemical signals and body language that triggered its hunting instincts. But this human was different. There was no fear scent, no panic movements, no prey behavior at all. Jiho looked directly into the creature's eyes, something that would be seen as either a threat or a challenge by most predators. But he wasn't challenging the shadow stalker. His posture was calm but confident, the stance of someone who understood dangerous animals. "Easy," Jiho said softly in English, his voice barely above a whisper. "Easy there. Nobody wants to hurt you." The creature's ears twitched at the sound of his voice. It took one step closer, then stopped, still trying to understand what this human was. "He's talking to it," someone whispered in amazement. "Humans can communicate with apex predators," asked Professor Veltar, his crystal body now showing curious green patterns mixed with the alarm colors. Jiho slowly reached into his backpack, moving his hand very carefully so he wouldn't trigger any sudden movements from the shadow stalker. The creature watched him intently, its muscles tensed and ready to strike if this strange being became a threat. From his pack, Jiho pulled out his lunch bag. Inside was a sandwich his roommate had made for him that morning. It wasn't much, just bread and some kind of processed meat, but it was food. Still moving very slowly, Jiho opened the bag and tore off a piece of the meat. The shadow stalker's nostrils flared as it caught the scent. The creature had been in captivity for days, probably not fed much during transport. Without breaking eye contact, Jiho tossed the piece of meat to his left, away from both himself and the other students. The shadow stalker's head snapped toward the food, its predatory instincts momentarily overriding its confusion about the fearless human. "That's it," Jiho said softly. "You're just hungry and confused, aren't you?" The creature looked back at him, then at the food, then at him again. It was clearly trying to decide if this was some kind of trick. Slowly, never taking its eyes off Jiho, the shadow stalker moved toward the food. It sniffed the meat carefully, then quickly ate it. When nothing bad happened, the creature's posture relaxed slightly. "Incredible," breathed Professor Veltar. "The human is using food to establish dominance without aggression. He's treating it like a confused animal rather than a monster." Jiho tore off another piece of meat and tossed it in the same direction. This time, the shadow stalker moved to get it more quickly, though it still kept watching the human who showed no fear. For the first time since the creature had escaped, the room began to feel less like a death trap and more like a classroom with a very unusual lesson taking place. But Jiho knew this was just the beginning. He had managed to confuse the predator and redirect its attention, but the shadow stalker was still free, still dangerous, and still capable of killing everyone in the room if something went wrong. The shadow stalker finished eating the second piece of meat and looked back at Jiho expectantly. The creature was no longer in full hunting mode, but it wasn't completely calm either. Its claws were still extended and its muscles remained tense, ready to react to any sudden movement. "You're doing well," Jiho said quietly, speaking more to himself than to the creature. He could hear sirens in the distance as Academy security rushed toward their classroom, but they were still several minutes away. "How is he staying so calm?" Taman whispered from his hiding spot behind an overturned desk. His voice was full of amazement and fear. Professor Veltar answered without taking his eyes off the incredible scene in front of them. "Human Deathworlder training. Their species evolved alongside apex predators. They understand them in ways we cannot." Jiho heard the professor's words, but he was too focused to respond. The shadow stalker was studying him with obvious intelligence, trying to figure out what kind of creature could stand so close without showing fear. Jiho knew that one wrong move would restart the hunting behavior. "On Earth," Jiho said softly, still maintaining eye contact with the creature, "we have animals just as dangerous as you. Bears that could crush a car, big cats that hunt in perfect silence, snakes with venom that kills in minutes." He tore off another piece of meat, but this time he held it in his open palm instead of throwing it. The shadow stalker's eyes fixed on the food, but it didn't move forward immediately. This was a test. If the human was trying to trick it, getting close enough to take food from his hand would put the creature in danger. "The difference isn't that our predators are weaker," Jiho continued, his voice steady and calm. "The difference is that we learned to understand them. We learned that most dangerous animals don't want to fight unless they have to. They want food, safety, and space." Kixara, still pressed against the ceiling, watched in fascination and terror. "He's giving it a choice," she whispered. "He's not forcing it to do anything." Slowly, carefully, the shadow stalker moved closer to Jiho. Each step was deliberate and controlled, ready to leap back if this turned into a trap. The creature's camouflage flickered on and off as it fought between its instincts to stay hidden and its curiosity about this strange, fearless being. When the shadow stalker was close enough, it stretched its neck forward and delicately took the meat from Jiho's palm with its sharp teeth. The creature was careful not to bite the human's hand, showing intelligence and restraint that surprised everyone watching. "Look at its body language," Mirai said quietly, making notes despite her shaking hands. "Its ears are forward, not back. That's curiosity, not aggression." "The camouflage is stabilizing too," added Professor Veltar. "Stress responses are decreasing." Jiho had noticed the same things. The shadow stalker was calming down, but it was still a wild predator in an unfamiliar environment. He needed to keep its attention focused on him until security could arrive with proper equipment. "You're far from home, aren't you?" Jiho said, reaching slowly into his bag for more food. "Your world is probably nothing like this place. High gravity, dangerous creatures everywhere, constant survival challenges." The creature tilted its head at the sound of his voice, almost like a giant, deadly cat. Its large eyes never left Jiho's face, but there was less hostility in its gaze now. "That's why you're so confused by me," Jiho continued. "Every other creature in this room is acting like prey, running, hiding, showing fear. But I'm not doing that, am I?" He pulled out a small apple from his lunch and took a bite, showing the shadow stalker that he was relaxed enough to eat. The creature watched this with obvious interest, its head tilting the other way. On Earth, showing fear to a predator is often the worst thing you can do. Fear triggers hunting instincts. But confidence? Confidence makes them think twice. Bullen, still pressed against the wall, spoke up for the first time since the creature had escaped. But how do you know it won't attack you anyway? How do you know you can trust it? Jiho glanced briefly at the large alien, then back at the Shadow Stalker. I don't trust it, he said honestly. Trust isn't the right word. I respect it. This creature could kill me in seconds if it wanted to, but right now, it doesn't want to. It's curious about me, and as long as I don't do anything to make it feel threatened, it will stay curious instead of becoming aggressive. The Shadow Stalker took another step closer, now standing within arm's reach of Jiho. At this distance, everyone could see the incredible detail of its design. Its skin wasn't just black, but covered in tiny patterns that helped with its camouflage. Its claws were like curved daggers perfectly designed for grabbing and tearing. Its eyes were large and expressive, showing an intelligence that was both beautiful and terrifying. It's magnificent, whispered one of the Fusari students. Terrifying, but magnificent. All apex predators are, Jiho agreed. Evolution doesn't create sloppy killers. It creates perfect ones. The sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway announced the arrival of Academy security. The Shadow Stalker's ears snapped toward the noise, and its muscles tensed immediately. The creature's camouflage began flickering again as stress hormones flooded its system. They're coming in with heavy equipment, Jiho said urgently to Professor Veltar. That's going to scare it. Can you tell them to move slowly? Professor Veltar activated his emergency communicator. Security team, this is Professor Veltar. The situation is under control for the moment. Please approach slowly and quietly. The human student has established a rapport with the creature. Negative, Professor, came the reply. Our orders are to contain the threat immediately with maximum force. The Shadow Stalker heard the voices outside and let out a low, threatening growl. Its camouflage activated fully, making it disappear from sight again. Jiho could feel the creature's presence beside him, but he couldn't see it anymore. They're going to restart the hunting behavior, he said grimly. When they come through that door with weapons and nets, this creature is going to see them as a threat to its survival. What do we do? Asked Mirai, her voice tight with worry. Jiho thought quickly. The security team was almost at the door, and once they burst in with their containment equipment, all his careful work would be undone. The Shadow Stalker would become a cornered predator again, and cornered predators were the most dangerous of all. I need to stay with it, Jiho said finally. When security comes in, everyone else get behind them. But I need to keep the creature focused on me instead of seeing them as threats. The classroom door began to open, and Jiho prepared himself for the most dangerous few minutes of his life. The security team burst through the door with heavy containment nets and energy weapons ready. They moved like soldiers, quick and aggressive, scanning the room for their target. The lead officer, a tall humanoid with thick armor, immediately spotted the chaos and began barking orders. Where is the creature? All students move to the back wall immediately. The Shadow Stalker, still invisible, let out a warning growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The sound was deep and threatening, the call of a predator that felt cornered and ready to fight. Stop, Jiho called out, raising his hand toward the security team. Please move slowly. I've established contact with it. If you come in aggressively, it will attack. The lead officer looked at Jiho like he was crazy. Student, get away from the threat area immediately. We have orders to contain this creature with maximum force. And that will get people killed, Jiho said firmly. He didn't move from his position in the center of the room, even though he couldn't see the Shadow Stalker anymore. Give me 2 minutes to guide it into a containment unit, please. Impossible, the officer replied. We're not taking orders from a student. Professor Veltar stepped forward, his crystal body showing urgent orange patterns. Officer Krenval, the human student, has managed to calm the creature using methods we don't understand. Perhaps we should listen to his advice, but it was too late. The security team spread out around the room, their weapons tracking for any sign of movement. The Shadow Stalker, sensing the threat, materialized suddenly on the wall above them, clinging to the surface like a giant spider. Students screamed as the creature dropped from the ceiling, landing between the security team and the exit. Its camouflage was gone completely now, revealing every detail of its deadly form. The Shadow Stalker was no longer curious or calm. It was cornered and dangerous. There, shouted Officer Krenval. Open fire. No, Jiho yelled, but energy beams were already shooting across the room. The Shadow Stalker was too fast, dodging the first shots and moving toward the officers with incredible speed. Jiho did the only thing he could think of. He stepped directly into the creature's path again, placing himself between the Shadow Stalker and the security team. The creature skidded to a stop inches from him, its claws extended and ready to strike. Easy, Jiho said softly, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. Easy, friend. You're scared, I know, but fighting won't help you get home. The Shadow Stalker looked at him with those large, intelligent eyes. For a moment it seemed torn between its instinct to attack the perceived threats and its confusion about this fearless human who kept protecting it. Stand down, Officer Krenval ordered his team, realizing that firing while the human was in the line of fire would be impossible. Jiho, Mirai called softly from the back of the room. It's listening to you. Look at its posture, she was right. The Shadow Stalker's aggressive stance was softening. Its claws retracted slightly and its head tilted in that curious way again. That's right, Jiho said gently. You remember me. I gave you food. I didn't hurt you. He slowly reached into his bag and pulled out the last piece of his sandwich. You're not a monster. You're just scared and far from home. The creature looked at the food, then back at Jiho's face. Slowly, carefully, it lowered itself to a less threatening position. Officer Krenval, Jiho said without taking his eyes off the Shadow Stalker. Do you have a containment unit that doesn't look like a weapon? We have a transport cage, the officer replied grudgingly. But how are you going to get it inside? The same way you'd coax any frightened animal, Jiho said. With patience and food. What happened next would be talked about in the academy for years to come. Jiho, with the Shadow Stalker walking beside him like a dangerous pet, slowly led the creature toward the transport cage. He used the rest of his lunch to guide it forward step by step, talking softly the entire time. You're doing great, he told the creature. Just a little further. This will take you somewhere safe until they can send you home. The Shadow Stalker hesitated at the entrance to the cage. It was clearly intelligent enough to understand that entering meant captivity again. I know, Jiho said sadly. I know you don't want to go back in a cage. But if you stay out here, they'll have to hurt you to protect everyone else, and I don't want that to happen to you. The creature looked at him for a long moment as if trying to understand his words. Then, moving very slowly, it stepped into the transport cage. Officer Krenval activated the containment field, but this time the energy cage hummed to life gently instead of snapping shut like a trap. The Shadow Stalker settled down inside, its eyes still fixed on Jiho through the transparent barrier. Incredible, breathed Professor Veltar. In all my years of studying predator behavior, I have never seen anything like this. As the security team prepared to take the creature away, Kixara fluttered down from the ceiling. Her feathers were still ruffled from fear, but there was something else in her amber eyes now. Respect. Human, she said formally, using Jiho's species name instead of the insulting terms she usually preferred. You saved my life, why? Jiho looked at her in surprise. Why wouldn't I? You were in danger. But your people, we have treated you humans badly since you arrived at the academy. We called you Deathworlders and monsters. Why help those who have been unkind to you? Because you're not monsters either, Jiho said simply. You were just scared of something you didn't understand. Just like the Shadow Stalker. Bullen pushed himself away from the wall, his massive form no longer seeming quite so intimidating. I caused this, he admitted, his voice heavy with shame. My carelessness freed that creature. You could have been killed because of my stupidity. But I wasn't, Jiho pointed out. And now we all learned something important. What's that? Asked Taman, finally emerging from behind his overturned desk. That there's a difference between dangerous and evil, Jiho explained. That creature isn't a monster. It's a highly evolved predator doing what millions of years of evolution taught it to do. The same way humans are doing what our evolution taught us to do. Professor Veltar's crystal body showed thoughtful blue and green patterns. And what did human evolution teach you to do? Jiho smiled slightly as he watched the security team carefully transport the Shadow Stalker out of the classroom. To survive by understanding instead of by fighting. To solve problems by thinking instead of by running away. To treat dangerous things with respect instead of fear. As the classroom returned to normal, Students began talking excitedly about what they had witnessed. The story would spread throughout the academy within hours. The human who faced down a shadow stalker without flinching, the Deathworlder who treated a galaxy-class predator like a confused animal and lived to tell about it. But for Jiho, the most important part wasn't the dramatic confrontation or the praise he was starting to receive. It was the way his classmates were looking at him now. Not with fear or suspicion, but with curiosity and respect. Mirai sat down next to him as he gathered his things. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the craziest. Maybe both, Jiho admitted. I was terrified the whole time. You were scared? Taemin asked in surprise. You looked completely calm. Being scared and panicking are two different things, Jiho explained. Fear keeps you alive by making you think clearly. Panic gets you killed by making you do stupid things. Professor Veltar approached them, his crystal body now showing warm, appreciative colors. Mr. Kim, would you be interested in helping us develop new protocols for handling dangerous species? Your approach could revolutionize how we interact with apex predators. I'd like that, Jiho said. But can we start by stopping calling them monsters? They're just animals trying to survive like all of us. As they left the classroom together, Jiho noticed that the other students weren't whispering about humans anymore. Instead, they were asking questions. Real questions about Earth, about human survival techniques, about what it was like to grow up on a death world. For the first time since arriving at Nexus Prime Academy, Jiho felt like he belonged. Not as a scary Deathworlder or a primitive human, but as a student with unique knowledge and a different perspective, someone who could contribute something valuable to the galactic community. And in a secure transport heading back to the Academy's containment facility, a shadow stalker settled down for a long nap, no longer afraid of the strange creatures on this peaceful world. After all, at least one of them had shown it kindness and understanding. Sometimes that's all any creature needs to stop being a monster and start being just another living being trying to find its way home.